So I think we have board member Hart now. And I just submitted board member Hutchings and Vice Chair Norton. So I think we're good, sir.
Hey. See. Well, oh, there we go. Vice Chair Norton's here. Well, we have a quorum. In fact, I think we have everybody. So I'm going to leave it to Vice Chair Norton. She's going to run the show.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. And we are off and running, thank heavens. I'm going to start off by reading just a quick note that as authorized by Utah Code 52-4, this meeting is being held electronically without an anchor location to reduce the risk to health and safety by limiting the frequency of in-person meetings. And with that, I think we can get started on this agenda. We're a little behind, so let's rock and roll. It appears to me that the first item here on our agenda is the board discretionary funds, and Deputy Superintendent Jones, is that you that's going to be running with it?
Yes, Madam Chair. Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. Kemi Wilcox will drive, ma'am. So we'll drill into the agenda item in the backup. So just as a little background, and all of the committee members here today heard me tell the full board yesterday about the process that we're taking today here in Finance Committee, which is request for use of the Utah State Board of Education discretionary funds. We provide a discretionary funds update as an information item to the main board. So if we could just take a quick look at that. So Cami, will you pull that one up, please? There you go. Okay, upper right-hand corner. So just as background, again, we in the upper right-hand corner is the remaining funds within your discretionary account, within the board's discretionary account, that we're putting these requests to utilize here today with you today. So just as note, there's 300, and if you can make that a little bigger, Cami, for one eye Scott here. So yeah, 367, little over 367,000. There's a little over 417,000 of FML. We have a little bit of land exchange money. And yesterday, you'll note that I did follow up with Board Member Cannon's question, or Paula Plant helped me follow up with Board Member Cannon's question to explain the land exchange fund. So total right now is we've got $876,617.75 of discretionary funds across different fund sources for the board to utilize at your discretion, at your discretion and direction. So with that, if we could switch over to the overall memo for requests. So between now and the start of the meeting, we developed 6. Let me see. Wait, am I right on that? Scroll down, please, Cami. Make sure I got my total right here. Yeah, six total requests. If you'll go back up to the top, please, and I'll just walk through them real quick. I'll just, Madam Chair, at your direction, I'll just let you know what the requests are and let the members read the justification. I won't read them to you if that's okay.
That's great.
Okay, so the first request is for $100,000 for facility operations and maintenance. And this would be for or outside of available Division of Facilities Construction and Management resources. We do have 2 temporary positions that we need to provide temporary funding for. And Cami can provide more detail on what support they can provide, or they do provide us and have provided us in previous years. But essentially about half of that $100,000 would go for another year of those 2 positions. One position, it's a gentleman that helps with projects, operational and maintenance projects within the facility that DFCM will not cover, that DFCM rule or processes that they hold to all facilities to, and whoever owns them, right? The other agencies. The other member is backup to our mailroom, or the other employee, temporary, which is all good. It's all allowable, is backup to our mailroom. And so I just wanted to make sure that you had the context of the $100,000. Roughly half of it would go to for another year of temporary employment for those 2 employees. And the other half would be to pay the costs of minor projects. I feel comfortable saying minor, that DFCM does not cover. Second item is internal controls implementation. And Madam Chair, if I may, if I can just get through these before we ask any questions. So internal controls implementation, we're asking for $10,000. As you know, we had an audit for our internal controls, and management's response was to adopt the Coso Framework. The first of the 5 elements of the Coso Framework is the control environment. One of the key recommendations out of the Green Book is to enable an organization to have the capacity or capability to demonstrate, the hierarchical aspects or organizational aspects in a organizational chart that's descriptive of the job positions and demonstrates, that we're meeting principle number 3, which, I've described here without reading it word for word. So essentially this is, and since the board is the oversight body of us and our, of the staff, we feel strongly that we could use this $10,000 in a fashion to purchase available software systems out there to further develop and enhance our internal controls compliance or implementation of the Coso Framework. Next one, 3. 3 is training for general and special ed teams. So this came in, and we've updated this since the original memo that was placed in there. What this does is the intent is to utilize this funds to set up a summer training session, 2 days, an overnight session, where we promote general and special ed teams getting together to work on or collaborate or to, it was the recommendation that came out so that we're further developing the cross collaboration, not only within our own office, or obviously our office staff would participate too, but we would invite particular representatives from these, from the general ed and special ed team side for what you see in the justification for the 2-day experience. Number 4, this stems or follows on from the anti-bullying training seminar or session that the board received. There was concern, or not concern, there was the request that we follow up and that we identify what else we needed in addition to, and there's staff here available to speak to this, that would continue or promote the great efforts of our staff here at the USBE. So what we're requesting is a one half-time temporary over 4 years position. And what this position would do would be to allow for another position to offload work so that we can continue the anti-bullying effort and implementation across public education. Number 5, and we'll get to this in a minute, we do have a backup memo for this particular request. Every year, the URSA, or Utah Rural Schools Association, conducts a conference, and it's usually in July, or typically in July, has been every year since I've been here, I believe. And their request is, and we've supported this in the past, what's a little bit different about this though too, is that we, as you know, and you can see it on the discretionary report, the superintendent is provided by the board $200,000 for her discretion. She supported this in the past, and done it out of that amount of money. However, we had several board members who attended the URSA conference last year, were very impressed, and they wanted to see if they could also be part of the support to this. Now, again, we could follow the same timeline, but the superintendent, in discussions with the superintendent, she felt like we wanted to put this in front of you for your consideration. Perhaps this year, you could use additional money, or out of the discretionary point beyond what you provided her. If not, that's fine. But she does have a plan for her $200,000 as well. So last one, excuse me. is what is over the phone translation services. And it basically provides translation services for callers across multiple languages. This is a research and development type aspect. So initially, we would look to develop a program where we could provide at our level, at the SEA level, translation services across multiple languages with, if an individual calls in and needs that level of assistance. It also was intended, though, to develop further or project development for the website. And Chair Moss Chair Moss is able to articulate it or expand on this a little bit more. So before I take questions, I just want to orient you to a couple of other backup or pieces of backup documentation. So Cami, if you could go to so here's the URSA letter, right? And if you can scroll down, this is their plan for their conference in July of this year, 2022. And that's where we get that total for 33,420. Let's pause here for a second. What did it pay for? Okay, and if you can go out of this one, Cami, and go to the phone services, over the phone interpreting. So my understanding, and Board Member Moss can correct me if I'm wrong, Madam Chair, but this is over the phone interpreting. It's an example of what an LEA provides. And what we drew out of this was, as far as an estimate goes, we feel strongly that we could cover phone services for 2,000 of the 50,000 or 2,000 a month for the 50,000 that we're covering, and then use the rest of the money to again look at research and developing similar services across our website. Where we provide translation services and access through or with our website. So, Madam Chair, that concludes my overview or, the briefing on the request for use of the discretionary funds. We can open it up to questions at your direction and response from any one of the individuals that made these particular requests.
Great. We'll open it up for clarifying questions, and it looks like Stacy, you're up.
Thank you so much. I have two questions. One is, could you remind me where the discretionary funds come from? Is it a % of the budget? Is it a line allocation? How do we allocate that as discretionary?
Madam Chair, will you please recognize Assistant Superintendent Jacobson to answer the question?
You bet. Superintendent Jacobson, go ahead.
Yeah, these funds are the board's carry forward funds from previous years. In some cases, these have accumulated over multiple years. So it's growing. And just like all sections, when they have carry forward, because we have non-lapsing authority, they make plans. But this is strictly the board's funding to plan for and decide what projects it goes towards.
Follow up, please. Can I follow up real quick?
Follow up.
Yeah, I guess my question is more of how do we decide how much is put into this bucket initially? Is it like every year there's a certain % of the budget?
It's not a percentage. Every year when we close, after we've officially closed, it's whatever funds you had left over in that previous year.
Oh, okay. Got it. That's what you just said, but now, okay, now I understand. Thank you. My next question is on the anti-bullying research proposal. And I'm trying to think how, what this position is. I see it says a 1 half-time temporary, but over 4 years FTE. And so is this more of like an intern doing research, or is this a specialist who's contracting part of their workday with USBE? I'm just curious about the vision of a half-time temporary, but for 4-year position.
Okay, I'm searching for Tanya. Is Tanya with us?
Yes, I'm here, Scott.
Okay, Madam Chair, will you please recognize Tanya to respond to this? And Tanya, if she does, will you please let them know your name and your title, please?
Yes, go ahead, Tanya. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Tanya Albornoz. I'm the coordinator for prevention and student services here at USBE. So I oversee all the prevention specialists. And in answer to your question, Board Member Hutchings, we have currently a prevention specialist, Amy Steele-Smith, who oversees the bullying prevention work, as well as truancy and absenteeism prevention work. And what came out of the study session was, and some other requests from board members, was really a desire to work on that bullying prevention piece. There's quite a lot of work that needs to be done there. And so the request is really to offload her chronic absenteeism truancy prevention work to this 0.5 position, so that she can focus solely on doing the updates and the technical assistance and professional learning and things of that nature for LEAs around bullying prevention. And the 0.5 position would be able to focus on the truancy and absenteeism prevention work, which includes a lot of professional learning, technical assistance, reporting, data pieces as well. And it will also allow Amy to do some of the work that came out of HB 428 that was passed this session around the victim of bullying, the data reporting requirements that was there. So we're just requesting for this 0.5 position over 4 years to allow Amy to do that work. And the vision is that once she's been able to get the bullying prevention data pieces and the work where it needs to be, that position would then be able to end after 4 years, and she'd be able to pick back up those other pieces.
Okay,
Thank you, Tanya. Stacy, does that
that,
answer your questions?
that does. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Chair Huntsman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you getting used to that probably already after 10 minutes of chairing? I appreciate the work that has been done in this. I've already reached out to Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones. If anything moves forward from this committee to the full board, I would request that on these requests that we format them like our legislative quad charts. They have a little bit more detail in them on the so what and why now, and I know these are brief. There's more of course we're having dialogue on this, but I think it'll better, I like that consistency, and it'll better represent the ask. But one of my questions is on the anti-bullying, on this extra money. So, and I think I kind of heard it, but I believe, will this money create more opportunity for, and this is simple yes, no, the way that I'm seeing this, it's not about a whole bunch more research, but this is about more support to LEAs. Is that what I'm understanding will come from this ask on the anti-bullying?
Chair, may I answer that question?
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Chair Huntsman, yes, the answer is yes. We envision that the person, or that Amy, will be able to then do not only the research that's required to make sure that we have best practices and the latest best tools and things for LEAs, but also that she will be able to help work on the data reporting piece. That's been an issue for quite some time. And so, yes, that's the vision.
Okay, I understand the data piece, but we can be data mongers, but with everything that's happening with our LEAs in this space, it seems like a little bit more intervention from USBE, not really intervention, but more dialogue and more support will have better outcomes from our LEAs. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And of course, research supports that, but I am concerned we can get lost into research. I have one other follow-up question, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
On the over the phone translation services, in that space, I'm curious how we will control that. And I'm saying this in the sense that we definitely want to do our very best to communicate, but I can also see a run at it where the people that are having translation challenges, if they can't get their help at the LEA level, that they will come to the USBE side. I'm just not sure there's enough money into this pot of creating. I see it as a betterment, but I can also see it being very consumed. Is anyone assess? I mean, has anyone assessed that the scope and whether that $50,000 is going to go very far, or is it you feel like it's going to totally cover us for a little bit?
Madam Chair, Scott, if I may.
You bet. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I have done that, and Board Member Moss and I discussed it briefly. That's my concern too. And that's why it's important to that we use that backup documentation, that sample, if you will, or evidence from that LEA or that particular LEA. And Madam Chair, if you could recognize Board Member Moss on this as well, he can probably explain where it came from exactly. So
Yes.
we also realized, though, too, just real quick, we also realized too that this is one-time money, so it's in a research and development type aspect. So we would make sure, sir, that before we committed the board long-term to any kind of long-term contract, that we'd have that ability to ensure that we'd be able to more or less cover the out years, right? It's a little concerning too on the website piece of it too. So we would make sure we'd come back to you and report whether or not this $50K initial investment amount is sufficient, to cover these costs. But I do feel strongly that it is a good starting point. But we would never, over commit ourselves financially for any project. So I hope that helps. Did I answer his question, Madam Chair?
May I follow up?
Yes. Do we want to add in? I think we probably should bring in Chair Moss to comment on that last piece of information from Deputy Superintendent Jones.
Sure, thanks. I can wait for Chair Huntsman and maybe answer his questions as well.
Okay.
Oh, I have.
Perfect.
A possible way to resolve my concern, or a shared concern, is that as we title this, that somehow in the title that this is like a pilot research project and not a designated new service, that this is about managing expectations moving forward, and this is a research and development project, but I don't see that at all in the entitlement. So once this is done, then it's kind of completed, and then we use that data that we've learned from and make a different informed decision. But I just was curious, we could title it differently, and that's all my concerns are. I've expressed them. So my question has been answered, but I'm sure Member Moss or Chair Moss has got some other comments. So thank you.
Chair, could I respond then?
Yes, please.
Thanks for both of those. And this has come out of discussions that I've had with Dr. Estrada, and then those were accelerated during the session when HB 302 passed. There is a requirement under Title III that schools provide services and documents to English learning parents to the same extent they're provided to English speaking parents. And that goes to report cards, registration, handbooks, all kinds of things. And so 302 helps districts understand the need for compliance, creates an advisory council, which will help them select a good provider, and it requires us as a board to provide guidance about both the need for services and then the available services out there. So I do see this as a research and development function, and I think that would be a great idea to change the title as we put it forward. And I greatly appreciate Deputy Jones putting this in. Session just wrapped, and so this is kind of a follow-on, and it's, I think, a great opportunity from Dr. Estrada, but we could probably frame it up in a way that makes clear this is both a service in the short term and development of expanding our ability to help districts do this in the long term. It would also dovetail that some of this money could go to website translation. And I've spoken with Superintendent Dixon, the Strategic Communications Director is looking at website redesign. One of those will likely be a parent portal. And I think that would be a perfect place for translation service. So some of this money could also go towards figuring out how to do that and then developing translation of the website in the most parent-facing parts. And then again, the bulk would be spent on providing translation services. So I spoke also with Superintendent Nielsen that they do some translation service, but they could definitely use this money to expand that. So I think I would be more than happy to boost the amount. I think we could use this over a couple of years, but it is difficult exactly to know how much will be called upon, given that we haven't fully yet done a comprehensive approach to this and advertised it. And so to Chair Huntsman's point, we might get a lot of calls. Hopefully part of what we will be doing is helping our districts develop their own capacity so that we can bounce some of those calls back. But in the short term, it's true that we might have to handle some of that. And I think our staff are prepared for that if they have the available services. So I guess in conclusion, there are several services out there. They seem to range about 50, 60, 80 cents a minute. And so if we authorize this money, our staff could figure out the best one to use for our own translation services. And that would then inform how we advise districts going forward. So I'd be happy to answer any other questions or bring a motion, and I'd certainly be open to boosting that amount if we feel the money's available and could be of use. I would see Deputy Jones and Dr. Estrada coordinating how we decide to best spend that money. But
Thank you.
I don't know if I'm off there.
I can see Board Member Hart. You have a question or comment?
Yeah, so I'm just trying to wrap my head around what we're actually researching and providing. So what you're saying is phone translation, which I'm familiar with. So LEAs would contact somebody at the state to use the service, say for an IEP meeting or a parent meeting, if they don't have their own services, or we would use this service for things like calls to hotlines and such, or both, or what would we do with this? How would we use this service?
Sheriff, I could.
And I think is that for you, Board Member Hart? Are you asking Deputy Superintendent Jones or Chair Moss?
I'm open to either. Whoever thinks better.
Okay,
Take
whoever.
a crack at it.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Chair Moss.
Oh, thank you. So HB 302 reinforces a requirement that LEAs provide this service. And so my intent here would not be for us to play their role, but rather to help them play that role. And there could be some discussion with parents in the meantime who are asking, hey, I don't have this available. What should we do? I would see, and I'd be interested to hear from Deputy Jones, but I would see our role there as not stepping in and translating for a parent-teacher conference, but rather explaining to them that the LEA has that obligation and we are here to help them provide that service for you. That conversation itself might require translation. And then when they have questions about our own state services, then we would be certainly providing that direct translation. Does that cover it?
So the districts aren't using the service. We're just using this translation service to tell people know that they need to go to the district to get these services?
Two parts. If it's a district service, then we would be advising them on how the district should be providing it, and we would be helping the district provide it. There would also be questions that relate to us as a state office. And so if a parent wants to talk to us about things that we do and we provide, that would be a direct translation where we would use the same service depending on which one we selected. So I see that.
And then the outcome of
a dual role. One is a direct service provider, and one is a model and leader for districts and making sure they're providing their own services.
Gotcha. And then at the conclusion, we might have some suggestions for, and that's the research part, some suggestions on best practices for districts and LEAs.
Right, and that's actually required by Section 302 or Bill 302 is that we are required to be providing the advisory council on translation services with our input. So this would help us develop the ability to give our best input there.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Hey, Deputy Superintendent Jones, I recognize you, and I want to also add a question or just a continuation of Chair Huntsman's is, can we change that title for number 6?
Yes. So Madam Chair, yes, absolutely. We can change the title. I do want to just maybe pause here for a second, just make sure that we're clear on a particular piece to this. We currently do have at our level, at the office level, and perhaps this verbiage here in the justification is confusing this. We have the capability right now to provide over the phone translation services. And we're developing the website piece of it as well. So based on board or Chair Moss's update to your justification extension to you, this money is to broaden that, so to speak, right? Because right now the way it's done is the sections pay for it. So if like special ed section needs to provide translation service, that money comes out of their budget. So this is intended this money is intended to be set aside to further develop and augment based on 302 requirements and then the provisions as well. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear that we do currently have a contract in place to provide over the phone services. But and I think this feeds in well too, is yes, changing the title and making sure that, that's addressed in the quad charts. Should you pass this out with a favorable recommendation, we can definitely change the wording. You don't have to direct us to do that. But then we would capture this discussion and this justification better in the quad chart that, process for the full board's consideration. Again, not being presumptive here based on what action you do or do not take today. So hope that helps.
It does. I don't see any additional hands. Do we have, board member Hart?
Can I address one of the others, or are we doing these one by one?
No, let's take this whole
Okay.
item.
So
Item.
I'm concerned about the bullying piece. If someone could scroll down, I think it's maybe Kimmy. I really hesitate to. I understand it's an issue. Believe me, I understand it's an issue. But without some of the changes, without changes going through juvenile justice and some of the rules, and I'm not sure. We've got our hands tied quite a bit in this space, and I'm not sure that there's much. I mean, you can do training all day long, but training is I don't know. I'm wondering if that's a good use of money at this time. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure that the tasks warrant another person, and I guess I just needed some more information on that. I'm not interested in sitting our employees and through more bullying when our discipline procedures are way out of whack at the state level. I don't know who would be best.
Probably,
answer.
is that you, Tanya? Would that be? Okay,
Is that,
Tanya,
is Tanya,
go ahead.
Yes, I'm here.
talk to me about what that position really would be doing.
So the intention is that the specialist would be able to work on those discipline procedures. We've already sort of started that work, looking at overall school discipline. She is already doing that work, but the request is for the 0.5 position so that we can shift her other work so she can dedicate her time full time to doing this, because as you just mentioned, there are a lot of issues that need to be addressed. And you're right, it's not just about bullying prevention, but it's also about overall school discipline practices and things of that nature. And also providing that technical assistance, to Chair Huntsman's point, providing that technical assistance to LEAs to make sure that they're addressing these discipline issues. She just doesn't have the capacity at this point to be able to do it in a way that we need to address these issues in a full, complete way. So that's what the request is for.
Okay.
Does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, I just have concerns in that space that I just have concerns in that space. I had another question though, too, if that's all right. Member Norton?
Yes, and then we'll go to Chair Huntsman after you.
Great. It's a simple question. So these temporary positions, is that just a classification, or does that mean the employees at will? Or I see the word part-time, but then I see the word temporary, and I'm confused by that. Is this an ongoing position that just doesn't have a space in the regular budget, or can someone answer that part-time, temporary? Like, is there an end date for this temporary?
Looks like Deputy Superintendent Jones has an answer for you.
So the term part-time or half-time means, less than 30 hours, right? Because by law, if they work more than 30 hours, the term temporary means a position that is funded for a certain period of time. And this one would be for 4 years, right? So, and that's
so it's a year. Yeah, okay.
Yes, ma'am. So when we announce the position, we're very clear that it's, half-time, temporary for 4 years. I mean, we have to be conscientious about, we want to try to get as many qualified applicants as possible. If you only do a position for 1 year, 2 years, somebody might not take it, but they see 4 years and they're like, well, okay, but we're very clear about that. So did I answer?
So it's,
yeah, go ahead, ma'am.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So it's like hiring on soft money, basically. You're letting them know there's an approval to the, okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am. We're very transparent about that.
Chair Huntsman.
Yes, and in on the number 4, the anti-bullying, on that, I guess that's one thing I like about quad charts, is there's just a hair more detail on it. And if I bring your attention back when we had a study session and when they reported on what they were doing, how many limited resources, they also reported on some limitations and what more they could do. On the what more they could do in this space would be partially addressed in this ask. And so I don't have the charts in front. I can't share or bring their presentation back, but my recall on those, and my takeaway from that presentation is if we could do more, we can do more. And part of our discussion was in that space too. And with the opportunity with this funding, I see this as I mean, it's not going to fix everything, but it's a betterment in that space and an investment in that space. But I don't think it's not going to put new burden on LEAs. But I think it will provide quicker and better service as some of the angst that Molly or Member Hart was talking about. Roger.
Okay, seeing no more hands, do we have a motion here?
Crap, where's my thing here?
Okay, Chair Moss.
I don't want to jump ahead of others, but if there are no other hands, I'd like to move that the committee approve and recommend to the board item number 6, soon to be retitled Over the Phone Translation Services in the amount of $50,000. That would be for both verbal and website translation.
Okay, so you are making an amendment to the recommended action?
Just to indicate that the title will be changed.
Okay. And now we're going, so we would need to take a vote on this, correct? Yes, all right. Okay, so the amendment on the board is that we change the title, help me with this, on action 2.1, item number 6 to,
I would say development of over the phone and website translation services. Development and provision of over the phone and website translation services. Does that sound right, Deputy Jones?
Or we could just call it a
Madam
pilot.
Chair? I'm sorry.
We could over the phone translation services pilot.
Madam Chair, may I?
yes, please.
Recommendation. Madam Chair, I would recommend that the Finance Committee take the following motion. That the board approve using a portion of remaining state funds to fund requests 1, 2, and 3, total $310,000, and a portion of the remaining federal mineral lease funds for requests 4, 5, and 6, with request number 6 being required to, and there you go. Does that make sense, ma'am?
Perfect sense.
Okay.
So moved.
All right.
My motion to that.
Okay. Go ahead and vote, please. Okay, looks like that passes unanimously.
Madam Chair?
Yes,
So can we just check in with Cammie and make sure that she's captured that, that end state? So she needs to write it so that, we've got that piece to number 6.
okay.
Okay.
Tammy?
Cammie?
I have it, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you so much. All right, on to item number 2.2. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place. The Cambium Assessment Incorporation contract that we brought back from full board meeting last month. Assistant Superintendent Nilsson, are you going to take this one?
Yes, Chair Norton, I'm happy to introduce this again and make sure that we're all centered on the background. If you recall, when we came to the Finance Committee in January with these cost options, we explained that when we went through the RFP process and the contract development with Cambium, we built in some elements around that are designed to be cost controls, and while also providing the board flexibility around particular actions that they may choose to take over the life of the contract. There are several cost options contained within the proposal that was accepted that would need the board to authorize executing those cost options. The reason that the contract is built that way is to eliminate, or at least to take steps to mitigate potential contract amendments to the CAI contract, which sometimes can put the board in a position that's not favorable from a financial perspective. So we advanced to the board some cost options that have been recommended. A few of these have come through recommendations from pre-existing committees or work that's been done on behalf of the board. So for instance, the Spanish adaptation, that comes from the work that was done by the groups that developed the Utah Consolidated ESSA plan back in 2017. It included language that the State Board of Education would make efforts to, the language exactly has been exploring the feasibility and development of assessments in Spanish, especially in grades 3 through 8. Is contained in that document. This is an opportunity for the board to take a step forward in meeting that expectation. We also have, we had some discussion about item development in the proposal that CAI provided. Item development was not included. It's fairly expensive, as you see through this cost option proposal, to develop customized assessments and to develop our own items in a state. Utah's been doing that since at least 2014, writing our own items, using our own teachers to do that. So we brought that cost option forward because it would be a substantial change in practice if we don't continue with that model, and I wanted to make sure the board was active in that decision-making process. The item that I think is the most disputed, maybe isn't the right word, but I think what brought this item through the full process back to this committee has to do with the writing. We've had two groups make recommendations around writing. We had a group that developed the assessment strategic plan, which the board adopted or accepted those recommendations in 2020, which was in favor of having a common writing prompt at each grade level, coupled with a variety of short writing prompts to increase score reliability. Subsequent to that, the Assessment Accountability Policy Advisory Committee made a recommendation to the board about writing. They recommended incorporating writing into every ELA testing opportunity through short response writing items designed to elicit 1 or 2 paragraphs of writing. And I think this is the area, Vice Chair Norton, you indicated in more than one meeting concerns with the amount of time spent testing, particularly in the 3rd grade. We did review with the committee in January the amount of testing time per grade level. That information was reloaded as backup documentation into your resources for today's meeting. So I think you're prepared as a committee to just make discussions, particularly at least based on your previous discussions around the decision of what to do with the cost option recommendations related to writing in the RISE assessments.
Yes, and at this time, I am going to put forth an amendment to move that the board approve executing the cost option to a Spanish translation adaptive item development and delivery. Number 4B, writing prompt development in grades 5 and 8, eliminating cost option 4D, the short answer development for all grades, and keeping number 5, the system functionality for remote testing and item development contained in the CAA cost proposal and contract. Are there some discussions to this from the rest of the board? Go ahead, Board Member Hart.
I completely understand the short answer development. The problem that you have in elementary school, I think that people tend to forget, is these tests are on computers, which means students have to type. And when you add in typing to trying to get an answer out of a student, you've just made the test way harder and possibly not as valid, because it's not necessarily measuring what they know, because they're worried about getting their answers typed. So, and short answer doesn't give you as much information as definitely writing does. The thing I wonder, and I've been wrestling with this since it's come up, is the problem with 5th and 6th grade. 5th grade is the end of elementary school in some places. 6th grade is the end of elementary school in some places. For a school that starts with students in the 6th grade, getting 5th grade writing scores is a little different. But then the problem with getting 6th grade writing scores is that it's after 6th grade. There's so much developmentally that happens 6 through 8 that writing sample assessment is very helpful information for all subjects and not just ELA. So that's a lot of words to say I support this. I do wonder, however, if we want to have more writing available in the 8th grade or in the middle school, 6th, 7th, or 6th or 7th grade. I don't know. Just something that I think about.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I actually have a question, Chair.
Go ahead.
If we added grades to the writing prompts, I think this is to Assistant Superintendent Nielsen. If we added grades, do we have to use them, or would the items just be available to us?
Sir, can I respond to that?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that question. There is the opportunity, because the board has provided several formative based assessments. So we have the RISE benchmarks, the RISE interim assessments. Currently, the RISE benchmarks do have writing prompts that are available through those assessments. You could authorize staff in this contract to develop writing prompts that then would refresh those items that are in the optional elements of the assessment system, the benchmarks and the interims. I don't know if that's the answer that you're looking for, but I think that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. Thank you.
Thank you, Assistant Superintendent. Chair Hunt, no, Board Members Hutchings.
So, and I think what the previous question kind of leads to where I'm still a little maybe confused. Why are we developing these? Are we developing it to be a part of the end of year test? Are we developing it as a resource and a tool for the schools, but not, it kind of goes back to what you just said about required, not required. It's strange to me that we're talking about developing these tools if we don't understand yet how we're at least planning to use them. Or maybe I just don't understand how you're planning to use them. That question.
Can I address that?
Go ahead. Yes.
Address that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
So the cost options that you see before you with this formal option, especially specifically around the writing and the Spanish transadaptation, are specific to the summative tools that you provide, the RISE summative assessments. The item development, the way the item development typically works is we'll develop items for the summative bank or the summative tools, and then over a period of time, we'll refresh those item banks to make sure that they're healthy for our summative assessments. And those items then will be moved into the interim or into the benchmark. So they'll kind of flow downstream, if you will. But these requests that are before you today are related directly to the summative tests, except for the one about system functionality for remote testing, which is currently only available for the formative tests, the benchmarks. I do need to clarify one thing I said in my last response. We do have writing. The board does provide writing prompts in the benchmark assessments. We don't have writing interim assessments. I misstated that.
Does that answer your question, Board Member Hutchins?
If I could clarify, so we would be approving, the long-term purpose of approving this is to add it to the summative, each of these. Okay. And from what I read in backup, this is something that is part of the assessment plan. Question, okay.
And I'm sorry, Chair Huntsman, I thought I did not see your hand up, and then I do see your hand up. So
Well,
excuse me if I skipped.
Yeah, I took it down, but I'm still coming back to this proposed amendment. And now I'm trying to go back and reverse engineer a little bit of what we're really doing here. So I'm trying to, and maybe this would be a question, Madam Chair, for Darren Nielsen, is I'm trying to look at the end game here with this contract, and that's we're preparing tools, and which have options. We're looking at all these different, but you have to invest to have the tool. So the way I'm seeing this is the way this is being presented, I see options that are also turned into opportunities once this work is done to have the right tools in place to address assessment. So one of the challenges I'm having, to just be honest here, is I'm trying to, I like where the amendment's going, but then I'm saying, so what's the unintended consequence on the tools that we'll have, which are our opportunities to assess. What are we limiting? Because on the surface it sounds really good, but then are we missing something in this amendment? And I appreciate the amendment. So that's a question for Darren Nielsen. And I don't know why I'm questioning that, but my worry is we'll go down this path and we'll go, oh, I wish we had a do-over. Am I missing something?
Can I respond to that, Vice Chair?
Yes, please.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's hard to not miss things. Many of our contracts for state assessment from the time that I've been here have had multiple amendments that have, as Chair Huntsman, as you probably are familiar with, you've seen amendments come through year over year around our state assessments, and it's typically for things that we didn't anticipate needing. Moving back with this amendment to have writing development in grades 5 and 8 only. That does provide us a robust item bank for those summative assessments in grades 5 and 8, and will allow us to refresh the benchmark writing assessments in grades 5 and 8 at a rate that we won't be able to do with the writing prompts for grades for the benchmarks for those other grades. The contract that we've signed, that doesn't include any development. It does include the ability to lease, and within the cost of the contract allows us to lease the items that have been created by CAI. I don't know the answer to this off the top of my head. I expect that leasing would make available leasing within the formative assessments as well. So to address any needs around the writing prompts for grades 3, 4, 6, and 7 in the benchmark assessments, it's possible we could address any of those needs that might arise in the future through those leasing options that we have available. But one, to your point, one potential issue is staff might come back to the board at a future date related specifically to development for writing prompts in our benchmark assessments that do get used, significant use on those across the state. If I can add one thing, that 4B, right before writing prompt development in this amendment, in the cost options, there actually is an option 4A that describes what you're asking to do here. So if this amendment ends up being like this, I would recommend where it says 4B that be changed to 4A, because there is a cost option within the contract of 4A, which would be to continue item development in grades 5 and 8 for the summative writing assessments.
Thank you very much, Assistant Superintendent Nielsen. Board Member Hart.
And I might, Board Member Hutchings' question, this is just item development. This isn't what is going on the actual test. These are just item development. This is just item development for the item banks.
That's correct. Understanding that that's how the tests are generated, though. So what is written there? Writing prompt development in grades 5 and 8. What staff would do with that with our vendor is develop writing prompts for those 2 grades to refresh the summative writing prompts for 5 and 8 over the course of the contract to make sure that those are robust. That practice is common with what has been done on previous contracts with in Utah, because Utah has taken an approach to have a custom build assessment rather than an off the shelf or an assessment that we just purchased from a company.
So I need to apologize then, because I was totally fixated on something else. My question then becomes, if we continue offering the benchmark testing in those other grades, if we don't include item development, then those become stale and they're not refreshed. Is that correct?
That's correct, Board Member Hart. I can't tell you today how long and maybe I do have Sid Carter and Kim Rathke, and they may be able to answer if there's a follow-up question about how long is an item considered viable before it needs to be moved out and no longer used. I don't have an answer to that, but you're correct. In principle, at some point, all assessment items that we've developed have an exposure rate that makes them to where we take them out of the bank and no longer, we don't continue to use them.
So my follow-up is this, it goes in a different direction. Just because we create the items doesn't mean they're automatically tested on a summative test, correct? Or are we pretty much saying if we generate items, we are going to put them on a summative?
Yes to both. Well, yes to your second question. So when we do item development, just think generally. So even beyond writing, just any question that we write that ends up that we're writing for the purpose of using as measurement for student learning against the standard. We have teachers come in, they write that, then it goes through a process of bias and sensitivity, content, standard alignment, parent review. Then it gets field tested. All the items will get field tested. And some of those items at the end of field testing don't perform the way that we would expect them to. And so some of those, usually a very small number, get discarded and never used. It's part of the cost of development. The remaining items then that make it through the field testing eventually flow into, usually that very next year, flow into our summative bank in any content area, writing, science, math, or ELA, flow into a summative item bank, and then X number of items in that summative bank will be moved out of the summative bank. It's not a one-for-one, because the decision to remove items from the summative bank isn't based on, oh, we have a new one, so move one out. It's based on performance of that item and exposure rates to that item. Then those will be moved into the interim bank for that particular content area, or a benchmark assessment.
Does that answer your question, Board Member Hart? Okay, anybody have further questions, or are we ready to move to a motion? Or
I think Stacy.
Go ahead, Stacy. Yes.
It's like slowly becoming more clear. That was really helpful. So let me just follow up, because hopefully we're on a roll. So I will say, to me, there's a difference between voting on something and saying, yes, we're going to fund something that's already been approved and is part of the plan, and we just need to approve the expenditure. And approving something that's new. Okay, so are we voting on something that's going to be added that wasn't there before? To me, those are different discussions, and so that's why I think some of my confusion is. And so you clarified with what is currently here as 4B that would be refreshing some of those writing prompts, which makes total sense to me. If I remember in our discussion in the last committee meeting or so, the last time this came up, the short answer development, that was something new that would be added that isn't already there. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And the proposal that was included here for the cost option to develop writing prompts for grades 3 through 8, that also signaled to staff, if that was approved, signaled to staff that you would that we would work with our vendor to reincorporate writing based on those recommendations that brought the cost option forward. That would reintroduce writing into grades 3 through 8.
Okay, so if we were to approve what's currently before us, it would help you continue to refresh those items that are already in place, and then probably encourage further discussion about these additional writing prompts and adding short answers to the tests.
Yeah, if the board directed us to continue those, if my position, my understanding has been, if the board chooses not to execute those cost options for short answer development and item development for writing in grades 3 through 8, I wouldn't bring those back to you unless directed specifically to bring those back, other than if our item development for the formative tools around writing prompts for those benchmarks, if that bank when that bank becomes unhealthy, we would come back to the board to seek funding and approval to develop more items, because again, the contract itself doesn't include development of writing prompts unless the cost options associated with that are executed by the board.
Okay, I think I got it. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, unless Board Member Hutchings, do you have one? Or
I do have one
have a
more.
comment? Go ahead.
Just to clarify again, on this motion, I don't know who's controlling the text on it, but where it says 4B in that second sentence, if that could be changed to 4A, because there is a cost option 4A in the contract that addresses that exact topic, writing prompt development in grades 5 and 8.
So if the maker of the motion is okay with that, then I'd leave it in.
yes, that would be great. Okay, we have a motion before us. Let's go ahead and vote. Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you very much. And thank you, Assistant Superintendent Darren Nilsson. You are an invaluable resource to this stage.
So can I ask a quick question? I'll hurry and raise my hand.
Yes, go ahead.
Did we vote on what you amended in this, or
Thank you. Yeah, we've just voted to make the amendment. So now,
no, it's the proposal as amended?
no, it's the proposal as amended. So do I need to restate that?
Well, you can put, if you because you're a chair, you can put a motion on that, on this item as amended, and then we can vote on it.
Okay.
Or I can state it. Well, do you want to take a motion? I'll make a motion.
Yes, please.
I move that the board approve executing the cost options 2A Spanish transadaptive item development and delivery and 4A writing prompt developments in grade 5 and 6.
8.
Oh, 5 and 8. Thank you. Hey, that whoever zoomed in, help me. I didn't. Now I don't have to put my glasses on. And 5 system functionality for remote testing and item development containing in the CAI cost proposal and contract.
Great. Thank you. Board members, go ahead and vote, please, on the amendment, on the motion as stated. Okay, and it's still unanimous. Thank you. All right, let's move to the next agenda item, which is item 2.3, which is another action item. This is the LEA reporting assurances.
Madam Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
we'd like to excuse Deputy Jones as he's had to step away, so I will cover moving forward.
Thank you so much.
Can we recognize Policy Analyst Jeffrey Van Holten, who will
Great.
address this item?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Excellent. It's good to be in finance. I'm usually over in standard, so I was excited when I found out I would be able to join you all for a minute. So Board Member Moss, thank you for the invitation and the reason to be here. I'm going to quickly share my screen. I just wanted to, before I dive into what you're looking at on the screen, I just kind of want to orient you with some efforts that are going on here at the State Board to streamline and make things a little bit easier for everybody in several different areas, and then kind of focus you in on what it is I'm going to give you information on today of those different components. So the first one, actually, Assistant Superintendent Darren Nelson is working with Director Jennifer Thronson on a big consolidated plans effort. So know that that is underway and looking at taking all the different plans that are required by different programs like literacy, school improvement, teacher student success account plans, all of those, and trying to look at how to streamline and consolidate those into something a little more efficient and manageable for LEAs, along with some consolidated accreditation ideas. So Darren will come to you with some incredible things that are happening and updates down the road with some of those exciting things. I will not be covering those today. Something else I'm not going to be covering today, but just so that you are aware it's happening. We recently went out to contract through an RFP with a few attorneys applied through the RFP, and we've selected an attorney who is going to be going through the entire state code and making a list of all the legal requirements that exist for education, specifically that are LEA facing requirements, as well as a list for USBE facing requirements, so that we have kind of a master legal requirements list. The reason why we're going through that process and bringing in a third party is so that we can look at things like the assurances document that's required by R277108, and really looking at what is it that we actually need true assurances on, what are things that we're just listing there that are legal requirements, but maybe USBE is not directly in charge of compliance for that. One that comes to mind is like the Pledge of Allegiance. It's legally required, but there's no responsibility assigned to who's checking on who or whom. But just know that that legal requirements project is also underway and is just beginning, and that's really going to inform things that we look at with relation to the assurances document that standards and assessment has spent a lot of time on. So historically, Finance Committee has also spent a lot of time on that document as well. And then last but not least, what we're going to cover today is in relation to legislation that came out in the 2021 session, House Bill 300 from 2021, was established to create a whole host of things, but one of the things that it requires is that the state board review all of the reporting requirements and work with LEAs to find a way to streamline, reduce, and make reporting easier and more efficient and effective. So I'm going to kind of highlight, we're just starting down that road, what it is that we're doing on that effort and how it's going so far. I can pause right now. I see that Board Member Hart has her hand up.
Go ahead, Member Hart.
What's the length of that contract? When is that work expected to be concluded?
I'd have to go back and look, but it will be in the next 18 to 24 months was my understanding.
Okay. Nope.
Yeah, so it should be fairly quick,
Okay.
considering everything that's being reviewed.
Cool. That's a lot of reading.
I see Board Member Moss has his hand up.
Yes, go ahead, Board Member Moss.
Just a very brief comment to be clear, this was initially an action item. It was changed to an information item. So for committee members, I requested the item, but not seeking action. So this is a great overview of information and hopefully it's set up for possible action. So thank you, Jeff, for walking through it.
Sure. So what I have before you is the list, and I can share this out with any of you who are interested, but this is the current list of all the legally required reports that are in state code. You'll see that gray bar in the middle on column E. That is the dividing line between state code and board rule. So on the left, you will see all of the state code requirements. On the right with the board rule requirements, I think you'll notice as you go through those that most of what we do in board rule is not create a new report, but we add detail to what a statutory required report has. So that's just kind of this document I wanted to share with you that we've been kind of using. One thing I'll also note when you look at the responsible parties column, oftentimes, I think some people forget that when they require the state board to report on things, that means the state board needs to get the data from somewhere. And usually that somewhere is LEAs. So I think there has been sometimes a misnomer of like, oh, well, we're requiring the report of the state board, so it's not a burden on LEAs. And I just want to remind everyone that it is indeed most likely going to be an additional report for LEAs as well, because we have to get the information from someone. But you can kind of see as we scroll down, I believe there's somewhere in the line of 96 reports. So 95 if you count the header row out of that total. So it's a decent amount of reports that are required and take on different levels of intensity. And then we have board rule that typically complements what it is we'd like to see. Chair Norton.
Yes, I'm wondering if at some point we could also add some other way to notate on this really valuable chart. Which of these would be handled by USIMS, or USIMS would help with or take off some of that burden?
I will take that back and work with the finance team to add in which of these would be incorporated into USIMS. That's an excellent suggestion. Thank you. I see we have Board Member Moss and Board Member Huntsman.
Go ahead, Board Member Moss.
Thank you. And Vice Chair Norton, to your point, that's exactly why I suggested that we bring this, maybe just a little bit of background. We've got a couple things going on as Jeff is, and I don't mean to interfere with Jeff's presentation. Were you at the end of that? Or is this a good time for me to?
Sure, that's a great time.
I think there are 2 or 3 or 4 things going on. I think probably 4 that all relate to this question of legal requirements and associated reporting responsibilities and obligations. And so in standards and assessment, they developed the assurances, or revised, I should say, the assurances document that goes to the question of what you have to provide assurance about in terms of legal compliance. And so that document is underway. HB 300 came down. We in finance addressed a rule that went to the question of how we're going to look at reporting requirements that we implement going forward. And now we have a great tool that is filled out. In addition to the cost and time requirement, there's a notation on the rules that we propose to implement that tells us about whether there's a more efficient way, whether there's a burden in reporting that goes with the new rule. And then there's USIMS, as Vice Chair Norton mentioned, that is going to affect how all this data is gathered. So there's the legal source, there's the reporting obligation, and then there's the functionality of how that is done. And I'd suggest to the executive committee that finance would be a good place for us to correlate our overview and potential action on how these streams are moving forward together. So at the end of this, we have a really good visibility about the state of legal requirements, the associated reporting, and how that's streamlined, and that we might be able to weigh in that process as it goes forward. The one action item I had suggested but pulled, I won't address thoroughly, but there was a good working group of people from districts and charters, large and small, that were involved in providing a lot of input on Susan Pulsifer's bill that I think would also help this process. And so that's just a preview of something that I think was a little premature because we just got out of a session, but I'd like to consider for next time. So that's the idea here. There's a lot going on. The legislative audit identified a total of about 300 and something reporting assurance obligations, and they've whittled that down to 6 sources of that. So that's my intent here. I hope we can have some discussion. I spoke with Chair Hansen, and he was in support of finance playing a correlative role, even though that assurance document went through standards of assessment. Perhaps it goes back there, but felt like this would be a good opportunity for us to weigh in, especially as we do a lot of work with VAs to get great reports on USIMS. So I really appreciate Jeff walking through that. I didn't mean to interfere if you had more, but just wanted to give the background of why I wanted to raise this here and think about maybe action to support making sure all of those trains are running in concert going forward. We come out of that with some streamlining of barriers and some identification of other possible efficiencies that we can have, so that really the end goal of all this, and I kind of took this out of that working group that I was involved in, and that had folks like our own San Yuri, Ben Dalton, Susan Edwards, John Larson, Cassie Hayes, a pretty good 7 or 8 person group from across the spectrum. And the idea was simply to that leaders have time to, and so that if there's anything we can do to identify reporting efficiencies that free them up for that work, that this would be a really good service to those leaders out in the field. So thank you for letting me weigh in. And Jeff, again, if you had more to present, I didn't want to interfere.
Thank you. And can we also recognize Chair Huntsman at this point? Thank you. Chair Huntsman, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple things. I'm excited about this process, but I think it's important for the Finance Committee to know a little bit of history on attempts to try to accomplish what we're trying to do to accommodate the legislature. And as Chair Moss was saying, talking with VAs and some other things, but just so you know some history, this attempt, we attempted as USBE to tackle this, and Jeff, maybe you can recall, we had a task force called Eliminating Barriers. And our goal and objective was to try to reduce, and it started off with Senator Howard Stevenson coming to our board meeting. And of course, we were getting a lot of I called them rocks in our backpack. Seems like every session more rocks put in, and so the LEAs have to carry the burden. And so I made a couple comments in a board meeting with him sitting there, was not a personal attack, about taking the rocks out of the backpack. And he challenged us. He says, do it, USBE. Nothing's stopping you. Do it. And then as a joke, board member Stokes, I think before the meeting was out, I had a Spider-Man backpack, kid's backpack full of rocks, put there behind I received it. And, but so as a result of that, and then I ended up becoming chair, we formed a task force on this eliminating barriers. So there's some lessons learned from that task force of having people at the table, board members and others. And honestly, we did not eliminate very many barriers. We had a few, and we'd have our legislative ask. So what's being proposed here between this study, that's this work, I guess, that's being done, and what's being proposed in this work is just a whole new reset of attempts, but we've got to be in it for the long haul, and it's going to take years. I'm just priming the pump here for your managing your expectation, years of inventory and addressing, moving something forward, getting consensus, and taking things to the legislature to modify what's in statute. And I've got a follow-up. Did I misrepresent what we were doing in the past? This is a question, Madam Chair, for Jeff and Holton. Did I misrepresent what we've done in the past?
Thank you. I appreciate that history, and I'm sure the rest of the board does too. So yeah, let's go ahead and
but I've got one more comment on the moving forward. On this spreadsheet, I think we would, and if you guys agree, I think on our statute that it benefited us in the past when we were talking about it, is to have the origin date when it first came to effect and when it was last touched, somehow a reference. I also, in our spreadsheet, this will help on the USIMS method of, and this has to do with the LEA, is the data that is submitted. Is it data that they have, or do they have to create the data? This is all stuff that we wish we would have had before. So I'm not sure how that fits under what column, but if it's data that already exists, USIMS, it plugs right into USIMS because it will be in their database. If they have to correlate or create, then we have to ask ourselves, can USIMS do that? But I think the method that the data is acquired before submission would be a benefit as we're getting to the USIM. That's all my comments, Madam Chair.
thank you. And Director Van Holten, is that something that we can take forward and work with?
Absolutely.
Great.
No, that
Okay.
is really good feedback. Thank you.
Okay, let's continue on then. Thank you.
So I just wanted to quickly add the one way that we are carrying out looking at these reports and how we can streamline and what we can do better is we are creating a survey for each report and sending them out. So it's kind of one of those, you got to spend money to make money concepts. So we're going to create more reports to create less reports later. So we have been sending out surveys on each report in batches. We just did our first batch in January during the session. Representative Pulsifer was really wanting to run some legislation. I think she spoke to some of you directly about that. So we sent out 4 surveys. We got robust responses to 2 of the 4. More robust responses come. We have learned when we send it directly to the LEA's contact who's responsible for the report versus asking for it to be trickled down. So the 2 that got a lot of robust response was early literacy and digital teaching and learning on their reports. We were able to quickly synthesize the responses and produce House Bill 481, which passed the session and is reducing some of the requirements of those reports or shifting it in DTL's example where the evaluator that is required by DTL is now going to be required to do more of the reporting than the LEA to kind of shift the burden. So that's just kind of an example of how we're going to go through this. We're trying to find out what is useful, what is not useful, what are the requirements in statute that LEAs do not find helpful for any of these given reports. I only mention that because there is no rhyme or reason to which reports I am creating surveys on and sending out. So if you as a committee or as individual board members want to just say, hey, in your next batch, really elevate this report or that report, I'd really like to know how LEAs feel about it. I welcome those suggestions, and I don't think you need to make a motion or anything, but I can definitely elevate any of the reports feedback that you would want. With that, Madam Vice Chair, that is all I came to present, and I'm happy to answer further questions. I saw that Board Member Hutchinson had her hand up, and Chair Moss has his up as well.
Okay. Board Member Hutchins, let's go. That's great.
Yes. Thank you so much. I just wanted to make sure that your presentation was done, Jeff, because that was great, super helpful. I just want to say this is so needed by the LEAs. You know, every minute that we take away that we're focusing on reports, we need to do reports that are important and that are used and help improve schools. But beyond that, we need to focus our time and attention on our students. And so I love that you're doing this, and I would like to make a motion if we're ready for that.
This actually is not an action item. I guess it's not an action item. It's not been on the agenda as one. So let's, but that will be coming at a time very soon.
Sounds good.
Chair Moss.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. I greatly appreciate this, and again, what I had in mind, and hopefully we can look at next month, are perhaps actions that we might take to help correlate and guide this process. There's a lot of great work being done. This will make it visible in one spot, and one thing that I think, and Vice Chair Norton's question suggested this, that perhaps we end up with kind of a master list of both the legal source of the requirement that came out of standards and assessment, the reporting analysis that's being reviewed here, how that fits into USIMS, and we really have a comprehensive view. And my one suggestion for next month would be that, again, some of those folks that were on that working group would be very good to provide the input that Jeff is requesting about which reports are most important to focus on next. And our committee members, of course, as well. So I really appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to sort of having this. I would hope as perhaps a regular correlation item at some element of regularity, so that we know how these are moving forward, and you can I weigh in next time about possible action to support that good work that's being done. So thank you, Jeff.
Great. Thank you so much. Chair Huntsman.
Yes, I really appreciate this dialogue. I can't tell you how excited I am about this. But before, as we prepare for our next month's meeting, and most likely this will be an actual item, I think that might help us with this, is if something moves forward to have an internal working group or whatever it is. I'm curious if this is doable, Madam Chair, if staff can come back to us and kind of timeline a few things. We've talked about that like study report thing, that 18 to 24 months. We don't need to wait for that, by the way. and then but if we can talk about, there's some long term, and I think 18 to 24 months seems long to me. But it's a lot of work to get this report. But if there's a way that we see and we can chart or map out a kind of a pathway, that if we are moving something forward, that as a working group or whatever, we in that we have kind of short-term goals or expectations of this working group. So for an example, if say there is a working group and they just know of something that is glaring and a huge, that they would work on that and then forward something to the board that is more immediate, that by this fall, and I'm kind of taking my mind clear back to the eliminating barrier task force. If we know of something and it's clear, and we want to take something to the legislature to change or modify statute, let's get on it now and not wait till the study and other things happening. And so I think you're going to have a working group for several years, kind of cranking this out. So I'm going to go back to my original request here is if by next month, if it's doable to staff, that there's short-term expectations, short, mid, and long, as we're working through this group. And I think it will help with this crafting a motion and move something really good forward to our board in managing those expectations, both short-term and long-term. Roger.
That sounds great. And Chair, is that something that we could get so that we're reporting on monthly in our general board meeting of reporting that's been eliminated or movement has been made on?
Well, I think as soon as they have something they want to move on, they quickly get that out and it will go on an agenda into a committee to go before the full board.
Yeah, or into a legislative ask.
Yeah, on the legislative ask or something we do internally. So it would be very difficult to serve on this committee if you couldn't if you couldn't act quickly when you know there's a betterment that needs to come before us, instead of a lag and a wait. So I think the urgency right now that we hear from many is, if we can do it better, let's do it and not procrastinate on it. So I appreciate Member Moss and others that are trying to move this to the front burner and start seeing some action on and support. If I remember right, was it House Bill 300? I didn't write it down, sorry, but I think it was. So, but I think if we get the expectation piece into our next meeting, again, I think we can craft a really good motion on a working group or whatever we choose to move forward to whatever we call it as we move up forward to the board. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any more clarifying questions. Does that conclude your presentation, Jeff?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so our next item, 2.4, is recognition of progress, achievements, or improvements. And I think that goes back to you, Deborah. Is that correct?
So this is a perpetual agenda item that we have every month. It's the opportunity to recognize any progress, achievements, or improvements that we may have. In this particular agenda item, we have one item in this agenda item this time. It's the monthly program report for USIMS. This is just for information or for your review. For this month, next month will be your quarterly full presentation from IT. And we actually have Director Felt in attendance today to answer any questions that you may have on this particular item.
Okay. Are there any questions for Director Felt? Well, that's a good sign. Progress is moving on then. Great. Okay, so the next agenda item is also discussion, the request for data and information, and I don't know if we have anything new to add into that. Do you have anything on that, Director Jacobson?
Correct. This is another perpetual item that we have, and it's to give committee members the opportunity to make a request from your staff to provide any data and information. So at this time, we just want to open that up to see if you have any requests.
My one request that we may have going forward, it won't be for next month, but as we discussed earlier today, that we wanted to keep an eye on that translation services. So that will be data, I think, that would be important to watch from that pilot. Are there other ideas? Okay, let's move on then to item 2.6.
Well,
Another-
I have that one. Sorry, I'm trying to get my
Go ahead.
hand up and I can't.
Okay,
I'm bad. Sorry.
go ahead, Chair.
So I'm curious, as we're going into this as an information request, and maybe we'll have it by then. I am curious on, and I'll liken it to rocks in our backpack. What happened this legislative session that created additional burden and reporting requirements? And identify the bills that added burden. And know who the bills, what bills they are, what the burden is, and we can definitely get into who the bill sponsors were.
Mhm.
Yes.
But just as an information item. So as we're trending to take rocks out, there's going to be a trend to put some in.
Mhm.
That'd be an information request. Thank you
Great.
for next week.
We can definitely get that for you.
I think sounds good as hand. Great.
Great. Thank you. And Sam, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, just if I may, Sam Uri, School Finance Director, Chair Huntsman. So Friday, as the superintendency meets, I'll be there as well, and we will be looking at every bill, as far as that goes, and we'll definitely have a field there. If not, I'll add one to make sure. And just, we were aware of looking at and tracking reporting requirements when we submitted fiscal notes as well. LFA has not been able to put a separate field in there yet. So it's kind of a, work in progress there. But we'll definitely be able to get that for you very soon. So.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great. All right. And item 2.6, an informational item, Charter School Board budget overview and support for the strategic plan.
So if we can recognize Director Jennifer Lambert and her staff.
Great,
Again, this
thanks.
is,
Welcome.
Thank you. So I'm the Executive Director for the State Charter School Board, Jennifer Lambert. I also have Stuart Akobia, who is our Financial Compliance Manager. So if you ask detailed financial questions, I will call a friend and ask him to help. Thank you, Cami, for sharing the presentation. Can you move to the next slide? So I thought it would be useful that in this presentation to just kind of give you some background on who the State Charter School Board is. So the State Charter School Board is an authorizer. And what are authorizers? According to statute, they may authorize and promote the establishment of charter schools, and they shall annually review and evaluate the performance of charter schools and hold a charter school accountable for the school's performance. So according to statute, those are our two obligations, and then there's other things that we may do. We also are very mindful of the administrative rules that you have created for authorizers. We know that those are in R277 550 through, I believe it's 555. Of particular interest to us is R277 552 and R277 553, which deal with approving new schools and satellites and expansions, as well as oversight of existing schools. Next. So who is the State Charter School Board? We are not the only authorizer of charter schools, but we are the largest. We authorize about 91%. And our mission aligns with what's in statute and administrative rule. And it is advancing choice, innovation, and student success through rigorous authorizing and supportive oversight. And through that, we hope to be able to have every student have access to an excellent education that meets their unique learning needs. Next. So to just give you some facts, these are not just from the charter schools that we authorize, but from all of Utah charter schools, though because we authorize such a large percent, you would imagine that we're carrying most of the weight on these numbers, so they would not differ significantly. But we have last October, 11.5% of the total public school enrollment was enrolled in a charter school. And of those students that were enrolled in charter schools, 26% were students on free or reduced price lunch. 33% of the charter students were students of color. 8% of the charter students were English learners. If you go to the next slide, it continues. You have 14% of the students are in special education. And then we have 137 charter schools in operation. And again, that's all of authorizers. I'll give you in a minute the number of schools that we actually authorize. I also want to point out that during COVID, we gave flexibility in the charter agreements, kind of a blanket flexibility to be able to respond to the pandemic. So just as you guys were offering flexibility to all of public education to be able to deal with many of the things that was going on, we also did what we could in terms of their charter agreement. Next slide. Thank you. So let's get to the budget. We have different buckets, if you will, in terms of our budget. And so our main operations comes from this bucket, and it is we call it CHBD, and it, well, there's actually a little bit of other funds in there, but the main piece of our actual operating budget is in CHBD. The vast majority of this bucket is taken up by salaries. We also use it for traveling out to schools to be able to do our oversight and support of them. We also do have some training that comes out of here, legal services, and just other needs. And next slide, please. We also do quite a bit of training. For example, in February, we and our contractors together provided 18 separate trainings in just the month of February. Total annually, we have $400,000 that is provided to us from the legislature to provide mentoring programs and regional seminars or trainings. We have found with the advent of COVID that doing these trainings remotely has been of benefit to schools. While we do miss seeing it in person, and there are times where in-person trainings are better, we find that our busy schools, directors, teachers, staff, board members appreciate being able to have the flexibility of remote access. And it also allows us to more easily reach out to all of our charter schools, not just the ones that are on the Wasatch Front. Next slide, please. So the last bucket is actually our largest one, single bucket, and that is our startup grants for new schools. And I do want to point out, this is not just for schools that we authorize, but it's for all charter schools, all new charter schools that are regardless of authorizer. It was originally figured for $300,000 for 7 schools in a year. We and other authorizers are just simply not opening that many new charter schools in a year. So this last legislative session They did take some money out of this, and there is some discussion where we may adjust it in the future so it's based on actual numbers authorized. Now, I can say just overall in the total budget, the largest piece of that is flow-through funds. The second piece of that is personnel. And then the third piece of that is contracted services. The largest part of that, of course, is training. So that's our budget in a nutshell. If you can go to the next slide, I can share then with you just some performance data in terms of what are we doing with this data or with this money. So here's some SCSB performance data. We have 125 operating charter schools, and that is 103 LEAs. And we have students that are in all 41 districts. Last year, we visited with all of our charter LEAs except for one, and we have since, of course, been able to visit with that charter LEA. So even with COVID and some of the challenges there, we are still getting out and making sure that we have that contact with our schools. Now, last year, we averaged 6 trainings per month. When this was created a couple of months ago, we were averaging 8 trainings, and we're talking kind of fiscal years. As you can see, we're increasing that now. And that was largely geared towards governing boards and administrative and financial staff. We are then recently expanding that to also include teachers and other staffs. That was some feedback that we were getting from our charter schools, that it's not just their administrative staff and governing boards that need access to the trainings. Now, in terms of authorizing, since 2008, we have approved 25 satellite schools. Now, that is a school when there's already an existing charter school and then they want an additional campus. That's an 81% approval rate, which makes sense because these are already, they're good schools, they're high-performing schools, so it makes sense that there would be a high approval rate there. Now, with new school applications, since 2006, we have approved 70 new schools. That's a 39% approval rate. So you'll notice that that is, we get more variety in those applications. Next slide, please. Just some oversight performance. That's another piece of what we do as an authorizer. So this is for last year. We resolved 88% of research issues without escalation. So what that means is we get complaints, or we have our performance metrics where there is triggers that if they have 30 days of unrestricted cash on hand, then what we do is we research that to see if there's any issues. And we're able to resolve 88% of those without needing to escalate it further. Now, with those that we have to escalate, last year we only saw that we had to take 3 disciplinary actions. And disciplinary actions, that is warning, probation, or closure. That's 1%. And we did additionally issue 27 notices of concern. We issue notice of concern to be able to work with the school before we have to take disciplinary action. We have annual certifications that is based on their charter goals, charter fidelity, and governing board performance. And we had 86 charter LEAs. They were able to certify to all of those things. Next slide. So we have annual goals, and this is the data that shows our what we did on our goals. So we were able to meet with all one of our charter schools. That is an important thing for us, to be able to have those touch points, to be able to connect with the schools so that we know what's going on and that they also have that connection. We were able to train 209 individual charter governing board members last year. That's 43% of our governing board members. This is something that from the legislature, and I think as well from you guys, this is something that has been a concern in the past, and that there's been a lot of desire to make sure that our charter schools have that training and have boards who understand what is required of them. We have been working on making sure that our charter schools are fully compliant with OPMA, Open and Public Meetings Act. And in this, we also added in additional things like requirements that they need to have for what's on their website. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had 57% compliance. I can report that as of this week, that has increased to 79% compliance. So this is ongoing. It's what we're working on. That's 81 LEAs. I do want to make note that what we find is that when LEAs were not in compliance, it wasn't because they didn't want to be. It was because of training. And it was just that there's so much that we require of our LEAs. Charter schools do not have a district office that they can look to provide all of that administrative reporting and just the details. And so that's where we're trying to help and provide that information so that they can meet those requirements. Next thing that we're going to be working on is the required policies. Right now, we have found 53 required policies. Not every school will have to do 53 policies. It depends upon what grades they serve and the elements of the school. But what we want to ensure is that all of our charters have at least the minimum required policies. We also are doing other things as they come up. For example, your staff has notified us that there are some concerns that when charter schools that they ask for parent volunteers, they're doing it in a way that is may make some of the parents feel like it's required. It's not a volunteer, but it's required for enrollment. And so we're just working to help our schools to be able to word it in such a way that makes it clear that it is volunteer. And that ends my presentation. The last slide is just to thank you. I want to thank you guys for your support. I also want to thank very much your staff. We have a really great working relationship with your staff. And I think that together we're able to provide both that oversight and support of charter schools that is needed.
Thank you so much, Executive Director Lambert. I think I appreciated those goals and to see the forward way that you are thinking. Are there other clarifying questions or comments from the board? Go ahead, Chair Moss.
I'll just make a quick comment. I really enjoyed my time on the charter school board, and I just wanted to point out that visiting all of these charter schools, at least 3 or 4 years ago, there were 115 different charters, each of which was its own LEA, and a staff of, what was it, 8? Jennifer?
If I can answer that, Chair.
Yeah.
It actually was even worse at one point where we were hitting 100 charters and there was only 3 staff.
So I just point that out, having been on the inside. Occasionally there are questions about oversight. It's a Herculean effort that the charter board undertakes every year to work with, support, and maintain oversight of a lot of schools. That's the point of charters, is to be independent and different, but it's a huge undertaking, and I've been amazed to watch how well they reach out and work with each of these. So just wanted to add my thanks and admiration for all that work that it takes to work with that many different charters, each having their own mission and goals to serve students.
Thank you. Board Member Hutchings.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to Jennifer and to her staff. Having been a charter director with SCSB being the authorizer in the past, tremendous support, really helpful. I know as charter schools have grown, so has the SCSB has needed to grow also. And they've been up to the task, and we all have growing pains. I know as an individual charter school, as you grow, there's progress, and I've seen the same progress with SCSB. And I also want to say, I am the charter director of a school that is authorized by Davis Technical College, But they have also continued to graciously invite me to their trainings and their directors meetings. And I still love to participate and attend because I find what they provide for school leaders and for schools is so valuable and helpful. So I wanted to personally say thank you. And I'd like to continue attending because I do find it so valuable. And I appreciate what you do for charter schools around the states and for families, for parents and students who, sometimes they need an alternative for their students, and for making sure that there is a place for them to be and in a school that is, has the support and provides quality education for our students. So thank you.
Right. Executive Director Lambert, did you want to respond to that? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I did. Thank you. I just want to thank Member Hutchings and for also reminding me that all of the trainings that we provide, of course, if we're doing like a specific training to a single board, that's to the schools that we authorize, but all of the trainings that are provided are open to all charter schools. So we do not we do not discriminate on that. We figure we're all in this together, and there's benefit for all of us being able to share and to learn. We also find in our trainings we're providing time for the directors to be able to ask questions of each other and to just collaborate. And there is huge benefit in having as many directors involved in that as possible. So thank you.
That's wonderful collaboration. That's great. Chair Huntsman.
Yes, I also want to thank Director Lambert for the presentation today. And then also, if she could just pass on to her staff appreciation for what they've been doing, especially we haven't been able to really recognize, we're kind of all in the same building, kind of sort of, and with COVID distance and everything, but the collaboration was still happening, communication and collaboration, and is still encouraged. And you mentioned it several times during presentations. So it seems like the challenges of COVID and not being in the same building, that those might appear to be barriers aren't there. So thank you for your good work there and continued work moving forward. I also didn't see her on this call, but Chair Tonks, I'm not sure if we're going to have an opportunity to see her before she steps down from being the chair, or I believe she finishes. Can you, as a question, Madam Chair, for Jennifer here, when is her term, I guess is what it is, finish? And then I have a follow-up.
Yes, go ahead, Director Lambert.
Thank you. So Chair Tonks, typically our board members serve 2 4-year terms. And so her second term is up in July, or well, the end of June, beginning of July. So yes, she is going to be off the board in a few months.
Okay, well,
Chair Huntsman.
Hopefully we'll see her before she finishes that term. And if you can give a shout out and thanks to her. I briefly saw a little bit through the legislative session, and it's good to work with her and your staff. So thank you for your presentation.
Appreciate that. Okay. Well, from what I can see on our agenda, we have concluded another successful meeting. Thank you all for being here, and we can entertain a motion.
It's not required, but you
well,
can.
Then let's do away with it. Thank you.
You can adjourn the meeting.
It's adjourned. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
See ya.
Member Norton, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you this
all.
afternoon.
Appreciate you.